Wednesday's autumn budget statement was clever politically, insofar as it may have bought Keir Starmer a little time. It will have appeased plenty of Labour MPs and the weakest, most craven trade union leaders who've backed his 4-year drift to the right. But it will do nothing to stop Labour sliding in the polls, because it's working class people who will pay the lion's share of the tax increases in the years ahead, despite a few modest reforms. One Labour MP told the Financial Times that the budget was red because it increased taxes for the better off. Most Labour members will be pleased to see higher taxes on unearned income from rent and share dividends, and a modest new tax on the most valuable residential properties. The hit to those who've been shoveling huge pay packets into tax-free pension pots is another measure aimed at top earners. The most welcome reform and the most expensive giveaway is the removal of the 2-child limit on family benefits. It will lift nearly 500,000 children out of poverty, according to the government's own data. So the obvious question hangs in the air: why did it take so long? Overall, even with the end of the 2-child limit, the budget is far from red, it's barely pale pink. A few welcome reforms on free school meals and the minimum wage, but limited in scope. Some well-off middle-class earners will pay more, but the super-rich, the multi-millionaires and billionaires who earn more money in a day doing nothing than most workers earn in a lifetime, have escaped scot-free. Reeves boasts about recovering the ill-gotten gains of these Tory-linked beneficiaries of COVID contracts, especially those who funnel through the priority lane. No one would argue with that, but she's talking about hundreds of millions, if we even see that much recovered, when the total hole from private contracts during the pandemic was £50 billion. The Department of Health and Social Care has already written off nearly $15 billion in unused or unfit PPE tests and vaccines. Why isn't the government's legal machinery going after this money? The few hundred million Reeves wants back is the tip of the iceberg. Even by her own standards of fiscal responsibility, recovering the money soaked up by corrupt and useless COVID contracts would plug the economic black hole everyone talks about. And again, there is no mention of the industrial-scale tax dodging carried out through Britain's overseas territories and crown dependencies. The powers already exist to recover taxes dodged through these havens, but the government refuses to use them. Mark Manser, writing for the Tax Justice Network, makes the point clearly. The £12 billion the UK government expects to raise across 2029 to 2031 by freezing workers' income tax rates, as announced in yesterday's Budget Statement 2025, could instead be raised by exercising an anti-tax cheating transparency power the UK has had since 2016 but has never used. And that brings us to tax thresholds. Reeves told the Parliamentary Labour Party that she cut the cost of living, cut NHS waiting lists, and cut the debt and borrowing, but has she? The biggest share of the tax increase in the coming years will not fall on middle-class high earners or the rich. It will actually fall on ordinary workers, whose tax thresholds will be frozen for another 6 years. Inflation and modest pay rises to keep up with it will push more low-paid workers into paying tax at all, and push better-paid workers from the basic 20% rate into the 40% band. Hundreds of thousands will be hit by high marginal rates, seeing small pay increases shove them into higher bands. According to the OBR, 780,000 more low-pay workers will pay tax for the first time, and by 2031, nearly 1 million more workers will be in the higher band. How on earth does that increase support for the Labour government or undermine reform in the polls? There will be no cut to the cost of living because workers live and work in a system rigged against them. Any cost passed on to employers, like increases in national insurance for the minimum wage, is always passed straight back onto workers through fewer jobs, worse conditions, or onto consumers through higher prices. And inflation is not experienced equally. For the lowest paid, inflation is high because food, rent, and energy make up a greater part of their household bills. Far from easing the cost of living, working class households will stay squeezed, insecurity will deepen, and that pressure will continue to push voters towards reform. Reeves made claims about improving the NHS with vague promises of more nurses and more GPs, but every organisation, from health practitioners, including the Socialist Health Association, has condemned the budget for offering far too little. It won't be possible to recruit the number of new nurses needed when those we already have are so badly paid and overworked that many are preparing to leave the profession. The Health Foundation's Hibba Samin says the overall NHS financial position remains precarious, with no additional funding to absorb new cost pressures. The SHA's detailed response slams Reeves' self-imposed rules on borrowing and the growing dependence on the private sector in the NHS, which is draining resources. The government is constrained only by its own political will, the SHA argues, and the real resources available in the economy. Present Treasury and austerity constraints are a political choice. They challenge the cap on capital spending, pointing out that publicly funded building schemes are likely to be far cheaper and more socially useful than these PPP equivalents. We must reverse and avoid private finance use of the NHS. There is no place for profit in healthcare. What is true of the NHS is true of education and local government. Teaching unions are rightly enraged at another meek pay award, nowhere near enough to compensate for 15 years of real terms losses. But what's deepening the crisis in education is the refusal to fund even that inadequate award. Schools are being forced into cuts to books, equipment and support staff because the government is imposing draconian economies across the board. The overall flavour of this budget is exactly what you'd expect from a Labour leadership still determined to prop up the market system. It is workers, from the least paid to the most skilled, who are being lined up to foot the bill for the crisis of British capitalism. And this won't be the last round of economic sacrifices. Even the more serious capitalist journals, like the Financial Times, are demanding bigger cuts to welfare and freezes on public sector pay. The bill on workers' rights, promised in the first 100 days, is already being eroded at the demand of business leaders. Protection from unfair dismissal from day one, promised to trade unions, has just been dropped. It will not be the last promise abandoned. Starmer and Reeves have always based their economic view on what capitalism needs. They won't tax the super rich or tax havens because they are politically and philosophically aligned with those interests. And even then, it won't save them. The press, business, and the markets will keep piling on pressure, demanding more cuts and more discipline, all while the economy limps forward. The OBR expects growth of just 1.5% next year at best. And that's without new global shocks. And as Marxist economist Michael Roberts points out, link in the article, the pressures of rent, interest, and profits will only intensify. A genuinely socialist Labour leadership could appeal to workers to take control of the basic levers of the economy, using them democratically in the interest of the majority. It could plan production, build affordable homes, guarantee decent education and health services, and offer real improvements to people's lives. But that is a million miles from the thinking of this Labour cabinet. And so the crisis of British capitalism drags on, with workers constantly told to tighten their belts. Starmer and Reeves are trapped. Their instincts lead them towards what is best for business and finance. But the modest reforms in this budget, like removing the two-child cap, were included only to appease the anger building in the Labour movement. Every element in this budget reflects those opposing class pressures squeezing the government. And when the government is forced into tougher choices in the future, and it will be, that won't go unchallenged. Starmer was already under threat before the budget, with MPs openly speculating about when a leadership challenge might come. It remains to be seen how much time he has bought, but it won't be much. When the new year arrives and the May elections loom, Starmer will be staring into the abyss. We doubt the budget will shift the polls, and more than half the Parliamentary Labour Party are already looking nervously at alternative careers. The key to what happens next lies with the trade union movement. The insecurity and uncertainty shaping workers' lives will inevitably be felt in their unions. And despite the weakness of most union leaders, pressure will force them to defend their members' interests. In hindsight, this budget won't be remembered as the one that saved the Labour government from its catastrophic decline, and it won't be remembered as the one that saved Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and head over to www.lefthorizons.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter and read the full article there. You can also listen to this on Spotify or any podcast platform of your choice by visiting the links in the description below. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.